Hi everyone, it's Connie from FAFF Designs. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am based in the UK and I'm a brand ambassador for Dixie Belle Paint. Thank you for joining me. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribing to my channel. And today, in the video today, you can see behind me there are a pair of quite large bedside tables. They didn't start out this colour. I had a change of heart with them. So we went back to the drawing board. I got some Pinterest kind of inspiration, and I also used the new colour lab on the Dixie Belle website. I'll show you how I did it. Made a custom colour. You can see that mint green behind, and really pleased with how they turned out. So stay tuned for how I got this transformation. If you've got any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments below. So this might seem like an odd place to start because it looks like something that's already half done. However, the reason I'm sanding this back is because I started painting this in a couple of different colours to where I finished up with. So I started out with some daisy and some antebellum blue, and then I just changed my mind. Just wasn't feeling it. So I'm just sanding the texture back. I'm not taking it all the way back to the wood because there's no need to. If I can see some of that blues and yellows peeping through, that's cool, because we are going for quite a distressed layered look anyway. It's just that I wanted to take the texture down that I'd already built up and basically just smooth the surface back down to essentially just start again. So the reason for my change of heart is an inspiration picture that has just appeared top right of the screen. I'm getting very good at this video editing, and I saw this on Pinterest. It's actually a company called Ian Snow that does the most beautiful furniture, and I love the style. Absolutely adore that colour, so I decided to try and emulate that with Dixie Belle Paint. So in that inspiration picture, I see layers of green and then a mint green over the top. So I am mixing Tree Frog Green with Sea Spray for my base colour. I'm going to create loads of texture with that base, and then I'm going to let that dry and apply a mint green over the top so that it will try and be like my inspiration picture. So I'm going to speed this up. I'm going to mix it up really well so it's an even consistency, and then I'm going to apply it all over with a premium chip brush, and I'm going to make sure that I stipple it on to create lots and lots of texture and peaks so that when it's distressed, the Tree Frog Green will be showing through underneath. Before that base coat is dry, I'm going to grab my thingamajig tool and I'm going to use it to apply texture in a slightly different way to the brush. So I always say when you are applying texture, it's really good to make a variety of different textures so that it looks more authentic. So I'm just using some of the existing mixture from before, and I'm just smoothing it over to look like really thickly applied paint, and this is just going to add, like I say, a little bit more interest and authenticity to the finish. So here's how I matched the mint green colour. I went to the Dixie Belle website, I navigated to the colour lab, then you have colour mixer or match a colour. I'm going on match a colour in this particular instance, and then you get the option to upload an image, which I saved on my desktop of the little cabinet that you saw earlier. And when that uploads to the match a colour system, it pulls every single colour from that photo into the Dixie Belle Match a Colour program, and from there it tells you the colours that you need in the Dixie Belle range to get that colour match. It also tells you the amount of paint you need for the ratio and how much that will cover. and that is all the colours within that picture. So you can see the reds in there as well. It's got the background colours, it's got all the accessory colours. So the possibilities with this tool are absolutely endless, and I am addicted to using this tool. It's so cool. So the mint green colour, as you previously saw, is a 60-40 mix of tree frog green and sea glass. So anybody who wants to comment below with a brand new name for this mixture is welcome, because the best that I've come up with is sea frog green, which is a little bit weird because what even is a sea frog? So we'll speed this up a little bit, because all I'm doing is basically adding a layer of the custom mint colour straight over the top of the tree frog green base, and I allowed that base to dry overnight because I had applied it thickly in areas with a thingamajig tool. I've got sea spray in there as well, so I left it overnight to dry thoroughly. I'm using a Dixie Belle synthetic brush, and I'm applying this mixture relatively thickly over the top. I'm not using water, I just want to do one coat of this. I'm applying it relatively thickly, like I say, because I find that way it chips back better. So when the mint green colour had dried, I decided to add a little bit of white detail with one of the new Dixie Belle artist brushes. There's a picture for reference again, just in case you forgot what my inspiration picture looked like. It does have a little bit of white detail around the trim of the doors. So I'm just going to use that recess part of the drawers, in my case, to add that detail. And I'm using the colour Fluff because it's a fabulous white with really good coverage. So I know that I'm only going to need to apply this with one coat and it will cover absolutely fine. Okay, we're going to have to speed this up, otherwise it's just going to be a video of me painting white lines for about an hour. So as you can see, I am going for a kind of rustic bohemian look. This is going to be a distressed piece, so I am not bothered about sort of really crisp lines or edges. If you did want a crisp line, then you could use masking tape to get that line super straight, but I am kind of looking for that more rustic edge, so in this case I'm doing it freehand. So next, after the white paint had dried, I am adding handles, not because I'm finished, but because I need those as guidance as to where I'm going to be putting my next thing, which is some silkscreen stencils. So I'm going to be using the silkscreen stencils in the pattern mandala, and I'm only going to be using a very small part of that stencil. So as you can see, I'm just cutting out two of the shapes that I'm going to use either side of the handles to just kind of add a little bit of detail and frame the handles as well. Silkscreen stencils are completely different to a standard stencil, so they have an adhesive backing, which means they are less likely to get bleed through. They are reusable, so that adhesive doesn't sort of go less tacky until after you've used them around about 10 times. You do get a lot of use out of silkscreen stencils, and they allow themselves, because they have that silkscreen mesh, they can be a very detailed stencil, more detailed than what you would get as a standard stencil. So I've peeled the stencil off the backing. Now make sure you save that backing plastic, because that will be what you need to put your stencil back on when you've cleaned it up. I'm just positioning them so they're kind of symmetrical, but again, we're looking for more of like a hand painted rustic sort of feeling with these. So if they're not exactly symmetrical, I'm going to embrace that. And then I'm getting a very, very small stencil brush and applying the fluff as you would a normal stencil. Now there is a couple of different ways that you can apply paint through a silkscreen stencil. This is just one of them. It's not the only way. You can do it with a sponge, you can also do it with a squeegee tool. Because I'm only doing a really, really small detailed area, I am using a stencil brush because I just have the most control over that. Also, I do want this to be applied quite thickly so that I can distress it with the rest of the piece. So for that reason I'm using a stencil brush, but there are other ways that you can apply the paint through a silkscreen stencil. So I'm just repeating that pattern all the way on the 3 jaws up to the top, and it's really important when you have used your silkscreen stencil, make sure you wash it immediately with warm water and allow it to dry out thoroughly. Next is the fun part, so it's the distressing bit, and I use my electric sander for this part mainly because I sand inside and I have an extractor system on my sander which removes all dust. Also, I have a weird thing with my eyes. I can't get dust in my eyes because it creates they basically go really sore, and I have issues with it. So I have used over the years different methods to distress. I've used sandpaper the traditional way with, you know, a bit of elbow grease, but I have now honed in my technique with my electric sander basically to reduce the amount of dust in the air so that my eyes don't have some kind of weird reaction to the dust. So I take the drawers out. I also make sure that I distress around where the drawer fits into the piece. I'm going to distress the drawer separately. I go all the way around the edge. I also take this chance to neaten off any areas where the paint might have gone over the edge of the drawers, because obviously I painted the drawers in the piece. And I'm just making sure that I'm distressing that stencil back as well, so that the whole piece kind of looks really consistently aged and there's not too much sort of newness, if that's even a word. Yeah, pretty sure newness isn't a word, but you get my drift. I also make sure I distress the corners, the edges, and places where it'd get more wear and tear. I am using a 180 grit on my Festool sander, and I find that if you use a really heavy grit, you can go too far and expose too much of the wood underneath. So that's why I'm sticking with a 180 grit on this one. Waxing is next, and that's going to seal the paint. I also see waxing as another form of being able to add age and dimension to the piece. So I don't just see waxing as sealing the piece, I also see it as a way to create another effect. So I'm using Bestang wax in clear, and I'm applying it quite liberally all over the piece with the La Petite brush. The La Petite brush is a natural bristle brush, which is the traditional type of brush that you'd use to apply wax. It holds the wax really well and it applies it really evenly across the surface. If I'm doing a very large flat area, I sometimes use a sponge to apply wax, which works equally as well. But because I've got some of the recessed areas and I've got quite a lot of texture on the piece, I am using a brush in this case. What you'll notice about wax, when you do apply your wax or your top coat, if you have distressed, you may get a kind of a hazy finish to your paintwork, but once you start adding that top coat, either wax or clear coat, then that will bring all of those colours back out and they'll be back to their vibrant self. So straight over the top of the clear wax, I'm now going to apply some Best Dang wax in brown. I'm using a different brush. I'm using a premium chip brush for this, and that's because I don't want this to be applied too thickly. So the La Petite brush has got a really large surface area, which is great for covering big areas quickly. The premium chip brush is a flat brush, and it also has less bristles and less surface area, so it's really good for doing more sort of feathered details with the wax. I'm using brown over this colour because I want to add age, and I also think black would be a little bit too harsh in contrast. So I am mainly concentrating the brown wax in the areas around the underneath of the lip of these drawers, around the edges of where the drawers fit into the carcass, and any sort of recesses or natural areas where there's some dings and dents, and basically just going in quite heavy with the brown wax, but we are going to wipe that back in a sec. Okay, now I'm going to remove the excess brown wax. I'm using a blue sponge, and I also have the clear wax in my left hand. You can't see it, but it's there. Oh, there it is. And I'm just putting a very, very small amount of the clear wax onto the sponge, and because we have applied the layer of clear wax first, it means basically you get more control over the coloured wax, and it doesn't sink into the paint, because chalk paint is porous until it's sealed. So I've sealed it with the clear wax, then the brown wax has sat on top of that clear wax, which basically means there's a barrier between the coloured wax and the paintwork. It means that the brown wax hasn't been allowed to sink into the paint, and that allows me to be able to wipe back that brown wax. I hope that makes sense. It does in my head. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments. And it basically means that I can remove the excess brown wax without having too much of a build up on there. I've left it in all the corners, the crevices, the cracks and areas that I want it to be left, but I can remove it really, really easily with a sponge. You can also, if you have massive regrets about adding a coloured wax, if you grab a baby wipe or a damp rag, you can actually remove it altogether, because Best Dang wax is water based. So after about 20 minutes, I took a clean microfiber cloth and buffed the wax to remove the excess and give a sheen, and then I'm going to put the handles back on. I did remove the handles earlier to apply the wax. I forgot to tell you about that part. I'd only put them on as placeholders to apply the stencils, so I'm just adding them back on for the finishing touch. And here's a couple of close-ups. You can see those previous colours peeking through, which I actually think works really well, and the distress detail, and the final shot. Okay, hopefully all that made sense. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel.